The European Union Referendum Act 2015 is an act of the Parliament of the United Kingdom making provision for the holding of a referendum in the United Kingdom and Gibraltar on whether the United Kingdom should remain a member of the European Union. The bill was introduced to the House of Commons by Philip Hammond, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs on the 28th of May 2015. It was subsequently passed by a majority of 6-1 in the Commons, approved by the House of Lords on the 14th of December 2015, and given Royal Assent on the 17th of December 2015. The Act required that the Prime Minister should appoint the day on which the referendum should be held, and on the 20th of February 2016 it was announced by the Prime Minister David Cameron that the referendum would take place on Thursday the 23rd of June 2016. In the referendum, the electorate expressed support for leaving the EU, with 52% in favour on a 72% turnout. Origin: on 1 January 1973, the United Kingdom and Gibraltar joined what was then known as the European Economic Community, under terms negotiated by the then Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath, in accordance with British Constitutional Convention, specifically that of parliamentary sovereignty. Accession was not subject to approval by referendum. Both Conservative and the Labour parties were divided over the issue, and the enabling legislation was passed due to sufficient Labour abstentions to counteract the number of rebel Tories. In the run-up to the UK general election February 1974, the Labour Party manifesto promised a referendum on renegotiated terms, which its leader, Harold Wilson, hoped would end the division of his party. However, the election proved indecisive and marked the end of Heath's premiership as Prime Minister, and Wilson was forced to call a second election. Later in the year, after the UK general election October 1974, the Labour Party formed a minority administration and held the referendum on continued membership the following year, which was approved by 67% of voters. For a few years the issue was largely settled, but with the approval by Parliament of the Single European Act, the Maastricht Treaty and the Lisbon Treaty, there were calls from Eurosceptic members of Parliament for a new UK referendum on continued membership. Conservative Party leader David Cameron announced in January 2013 in what is now remembered as the Bloomberg speech a proposal to undertake a renegotiation of the terms of the UK's membership of the EU, and subsequently to hold a UK referendum on EU membership. However, at the time of Cameron's speech, the Conservative Party was in coalition government with the Liberal Democrats, who along with the Labour Party were at the time opposed to any new referendum being held and did not have an overall majority in a private member's bill by Conservative MP James Wharton to legislate a in-out referendum by the end of 2017 was blocked in the House of Lords. The proposals were contained in the Conservative Party manifesto for the United Kingdom general election 2015, in which the Conservatives won with an unexpected overall majority. Following the election, the opposition Labour Party withdrew its opposition to holding an in-out EU referendum. On the bill's second reading on the 9th of June 2015, MPs voted by 544 to 53 in favour of the principle of holding a referendum, with only the Scottish National Party opposing the bill. The referendum. The Act legislates for a referendum to be held in the United Kingdom and Gibraltar on whether to remain a member of the European Union, which will be a single majority vote to be conducted by the Electoral Commission and overseen by an appointed Chief Counting Officer and a Deputy Chief Counting Officer, who will declare the final result for the United Kingdom and by regulation orders the Secretary of State to appoint a date for 4. The holding of the referendum under the following circumstances. The referendum must be held no later than the 31st of December 2017. The referendum cannot be held on the 5th of May 2016 or the 4th of May 2017. The Electoral Commission will be the public body under the terms of the political parties. Elections and Referendums Act 2000, which will raise public awareness ahead of polling day and oversee the conducting of the referendum. In accordance with the Act and the public duty of the Electoral Commission, an impartial guide was posted to every household in the UK and Gibraltar in the week beginning of the 16th of May 2016. Campaign period. The Act legislates that the official referendum campaign period up until polling day will be of 10 weeks duration, with an official purdah period, where all government and public bodies are unable to comment or publish information specifically in regard to the subject of the referendum for a period of 4 weeks duration up until polling day. Campaign groups spending. Under this Act and the political parties, Elections and Referendums Act 2000, the Electoral Commission has the authority to designate and to provide funding for 2 official lead campaign groups, 1 for Remain and 1 for Leave. Each designated group has access to grants worth up to £600,000 as well as television spots and free leaflet drops. The Act declares that these designated groups are not permitted to spend overall more than £7 million. The Act permits other campaign groups to participate, but their overall spending is limited to a maximum of £700,000 if they are registered. Spending by unregistered groups is limited by the Act to a maximum of £10,000. The Electoral Commission announced the official Remain and Leave designated groups before the beginning of the official campaign period ahead of the deadline on the 14th of April 2016. Britain Stronger in Europe for Remain and Vote Leave for Leave. Political parties spending. Under the Act and the political parties, Elections and Referendums Act 2000, political parties are permitted to provide funding for the referendum, although the spending is limited, according to the performance at the 2015 general election, and under the rules the political parties are limited to the maximum of each amount as follows: Conservative Party £7 million. Labour Party £5.5 million, UKIP £4 million, Liberal Democrats £3 million, SNP £700,000. All other political parties who receive less than 5% of the national vote share will have the maximum spending limited to no more than £700,000. Individual spending. Unless individuals are officially registered with the Electoral Commission, the maximum limit for spending in the referendum is to be no more than £10,000. Referendum question. The question that is to appear on ballot papers in the referendum before the electorate under the Act will be in English, with the responses to the question to be in Welsh, with the responses original proposed question. Originally, the bill gave the question to appear on ballot papers should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union, and in Welsh, a ddylaiard and as unedgar as yn aelod or in debiro period, permitting a simple yes-no answer. The original proposed question was very similar to the question voters were asked in the original 1975 EEC referendum. However, during subsequent research by the Electoral Commission found that members of the public feel the wording was not balanced and there was a perception of bias, and proposed a change in the wording of the question. The proposed change was accepted by the government in September 2015, shortly before the bill's third reading. Voting areas. Under the provisions of the Act, the designation of a voting area on the day of the referendum to be overseen by counting officers, who will declare the results of the local areas within the United Kingdom and Gibraltar is as follows: a district in England for which there is a district council, a county in England in which there are no districts with councils, a London borough, the City of London, the Isles of Scilly, a county borough in Wales, a local government area in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Gibraltar. There will be a total of 382 voting areas, 326 in England, 32 in Scotland, 22 in Wales, and single areas for Northern Ireland and Gibraltar. The local counts in the voting areas will begin from 2200 BST on Thursday, the 23rd of June 2016, after polling stations have closed. Recounts within voting areas are permitted when circumstances require under the instructions of the counting officers. Quote, "It is the first time that a United Kingdom referendum was counted overnight, as both the previous 1975 EEC referendum and the 2011 AV referendum were counted during the course of the following day after polling stations closed." Regional counts. The Act also provides provision for the results from the voting areas to fed into 12 regional counts, to be overseen by regional counting officers, which will be appointed in the following areas and will declare the results for their areas as used under the European Parliamentary Elections Act 2002. East Midlands, East of England, Greater London, Northern Ireland, North East England, North West England, Scotland, South East England, South West England, Yorkshire and the Humber, Wales, West Midlands. For the purposes of the referendum, the local result from Gibraltar will be fed into the South West England regional count. The regions will each declare the results once all local voting areas have declared their local results early on Friday, the 24th of June 2016. There is no provision under the Act for any national or regional recounts by the Chief Counting Officer in Regional Counting Officers' franchise. The right to vote in the referendum under the legislation applied to UK and Gibraltar residents who are British, Irish and Commonwealth citizens, in accordance with the provisions of the Representation of the People Act 1983 and the Representation of the People Act 2000. Members of the House, if Lords were able to vote in the referendum, UK residents who are citizens of other EU countries were not allowed to vote unless they were citizens of Ireland, Malta or Cyprus. The same acts permitted UK nationals who had lived overseas for less than 15 years to vote. Voting on the day of the referendum was from 0700 to 2200 BST in some 41,000 polling stations manned by over 100,000 staff. Each polling station was specified to have no more than 2,500 registered voters. Also under the provisions of the Representation of the People Act 2000, postal ballots were also permitted in the referendum and were sent out to eligible voters some 3 weeks ahead of the vote. Residents of the Isle of Man and the other Crown dependencies Jersey and Guernsey were not be eligible to vote in the referendum, as those territories are not part of the UK. The minimum age for voters in the referendum was 18 years, in accordance with Representation Acts. A House of Lords amendment proposing to lower the minimum age to 16 years was rejected. Calling of referendum. On the morning of Saturday, the 20th of February 2016, Prime Minister David Cameron held a special cabinet meeting in 10 Downing Street with his fellow ministers. After the meeting at 12:10 GMT, he announced outside the door of number 10 that the referendum in accordance with the Act would be held on Thursday, 23 June 2016. Parliament enacted secondary legislation to authorize the holding of the referendum on that date on Monday, the 22nd of February 2016. Eligible voters. On Tuesday, the 21st of June 2016, the Electoral Commission announced the provisional official number of eligible voters who are entitled to vote in the referendum on Thursday, the 23rd of June, under the provisions of the Act in each of the constituent countries of the United Kingdom and Gibraltar, following the closing date for registration on Thursday, the 9th of June 2016. These figures include all Commonwealth and Irish citizens, along with members of the House of Lords who are not normally eligible to vote in UK general elections. The final number of eligible voters was published after 9 p.m. on Thursday, the 23rd of June 2016 by the Electoral Commission. The following shows both the provisional figures and the final figures in heavy bold brackets. English regions, constituent countries, referendum result. The Act makes no provision for the result to be legally binding on the government or on any future government due to the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. The result of the referendum is to be a single majority vote of all four constituent countries of the United Kingdom and Gibraltar, with no super majorities, double majorities or any minimum turnout threshold required for the vote to pass, which will be declared by Chief Counting Officer Jenny Watson at Manchester Town Hall on Friday, the 24th of June 2016. The Act does not specify any specific consequences that would follow the result of the referendum. In the event of a leave vote, the government would decide under what circumstances to invoke Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty to begin a 2-year process of negotiations for Britain to leave the EU. European Union law would remain enforceable in the United Kingdom unless the European Communities Act 1972 were repealed.